Welcome to the Be Dadly podcast, where we discuss all things dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
And just like that, we are back. Welcome back to the Be Dadly Show. I'm Brandon Jones, your host. And today I am with Tyler McBroom. Let me tell you a little bit about Tyler. Tyler is a CPA, a tax professional, an international speaker, best-selling author, and also the tax and CFO partner for Tony Robbins. He is the father of two. He authored the book Cash Flow and Grow. He's got these two beautiful children, an 8-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. And Tyler, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I have to ask, and I'm sure everybody's kind of curious, but how did you get connected with Tony?
Yeah, so that usually comes up on, when I go on a podcast. And it was actually a few years process in the making. So kind of started back when I used to be partners with my dad in my CPA firm. Now I'm on my own. But when he was going to bring me on as a partner back in 2016, he told me, Tyler, I don't want to take a cut in pay to bring you on as a partner. So let's grow this business if we're going to bring you on. And so I took that to heart and took it seriously and started looking for ways to grow. And one of those ways was joining a mastermind program. And I got connected in this group and kind of got known as the tax guy in there. And so they asked me to do a 90-day course teaching kind of personal finance and tax basics for business owners. Mm. And I said, great, that sounds awesome. It could be a good way to, get some new business. And then about half the people who signed up were Canadian. And I don't know Canadian tax law. I know U.S. tax law. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out into another Facebook group that I was in full of a bunch of accountants and said, hey, any Canadians in here that might want to guest for one of the weeks and teach some tax law to these Canadian guests? And the guy who volunteered and said, I'd love to do it, happened to be the Canadian partner of what I am for the U.S. with Tony Robbins at the time. So he told me about this program, the Global Accounting Advisors, where at Business Mastery, Tony goes up on stage and talks about the importance of getting a second opinion in your taxes, and that he's gone around the world and handpicked the best CPAs he could find. And they're sitting in the back room and waiting for a second opinion to give you a second opinion. And I said, that sounds like something I'd be interested in that we could do. Mm-hmm. And so the partner who was running it was the Australian partner. His name is Paul. He gave me the contact, email, and name of Paul. And so cold emailed Paul. And this was in April, like early 2017. And Paul said, great, let's schedule a meeting and we'll chat. Tell me about your business a little bit, some numbers. And then the day before the meeting, so he was in Australia, so it was 10 o'clock at night our time because of the overlap. And we emailed him, and this was against our better judgment, but emailed him and said, hey, is there any way we could reschedule to do a time that overlaps our business days? You're in Australia, so maybe we could do like 4 p.m. our time. Mm-hmm. And he said, no problem. And 3 years later, we got a meeting. But so I learned a valuable lesson that day, not to reschedule when you get the opportunity to chat about being Tony Robbins' partner. But, we still took the philosophy of we're still growing. And so still kind of looked at other ways to grow, started building my social media following, and so every month or two, I just follow up with an email. Hey, can we get that meeting? Want to reschedule? Hey, I'm at 10,000 followers on Instagram. Here's some of my content. I think I'd be a great fit. Hey, I'm at 40,000 followers. Here's some of my content. Hey, I wrote an article for Forbes. Here's that article. I'd love to read, and ghosted for like 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And then finally in the summer of 2019, we got an email. And in the meantime, we'd grown from 4 people to 24 people on our team. And got an email from his assistant saying, hey, Tyler, are you free next Tuesday to chat with Paul for 15 minutes? Mm-hmm. And I said, yes, I don't care what time it is. And so we did. And he said, give me an update. And we told him we'd grown, quite a bit in that time. And he said, well, we had a partner that just basically didn't work out. And so pending due diligence and all the, kind of process, if you can hop on a plane to Vegas and meet with us and everything checks out in 2 weeks, then the partnership will be yours.
Amazing.
And so, 3 years of following up, we built the muscle of growth that would have totally totally overwhelmed us when we were 4 people,
Right.
if we'd have gotten that partnership. So, when Tony says things happen for you, not to you, it's actually true. And that was the case here. And then kind of fast forward a little further, we were partners. We did the first, 2 business mastery events. And Tony, he has 100 other companies. He didn't know us intimately, really. But then COVID hit. And so we started helping people with PPP loans. And started email blasting everybody. I got to tell everybody about this, and including the business mastery attendees that were in our list. And so then I got the email from the email marketing forwarded to me from Tony's CFO, and he said, "Hey Tyler, I got this. Do you have a few minutes to chat? This afternoon?" And I thought maybe I was in trouble for blasting their list or something. And so I said, "Sure." Tony's CFO called. And so I pick up the phone. "Hey, how's it going?" I start to apologize immediately. "I'm so sorry." He's like, No, just tell me what you're doing with the PPP loans. And so we told him we were consulting, how much you could get, what would be forgiven, kind of walking through that process. And he said, "Okay, great." And he hung up. I was like, "Well, that was kind of cool." Got to talk with Tony's CFO. And then I got a text from him about 3 hours later. "Hey, Tyler, are you free to hop on a Zoom meeting with Tony and me in 10 minutes? And I said, "Sure, I can do that." Did not reschedule that one.
Right.
And
can you do 4 p.m.? Because I'm
yeah, exactly. So hopped on, and then he kind of said, "Tell me about this PPP loan thing." And so I explained everything, explained the process. Little did I know that they had talked with 2 or 3 other attorneys and gotten 0 answers. And I was prepared with the information. And he really liked the way that I communicated it. And so he said, "Wow, this has been," so I was on the phone with him for 3 or 4 hours, Zoom for 3 or 4 hours. And he said, "This has been really, really valuable. Thank you so much. Can you help us get this PPP loan?" So I ended up helping them get the PPP loan for his event company. And he said, "This would be really valuable information. Let's you and me do a live webinar to the entire country in next week. Wow. Here's my personal cell phone number. I'm a texter. Text me if you need anything." And then, so fast forward, a week, and this madness getting these huge webinar ready. And, I did a live webinar with Tony Robbins, Tyler McBroom with 12,000 people. And then the next business mastery, I was speaking on stage. And so, but if I hadn't put in that work ahead of time, building my Instagram, literally getting used to talking digitally to the phone every day, and built those communication skills. So it was all just, this kind of journey forward. So that's how that happened.
I was on your LinkedIn doing, just researching a little bit. And one of the things I noticed is that there were so many people that kept talking about how tenacious you were. And these were colleagues from school, from Chapman. These were people who had worked with you on different projects. And they all said that you have this kind of, we can get it done mentality. We'll figure it out. I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm excited about the adventure, and just this. And now I'm hearing a firsthand story of just how tenacious you are. That's awesome. And by the way, for the listeners, he's like, "Yeah, we grew our Instagram. We were at 10,000. Okay. So he's almost at 1 million followers right now on Instagram, which I was blown away by. 952,000 people are interested in taxes.
I know,
taxes interesting.
Well, that's what I always tell people. Look, if I can build a personal brand and get, following or whatever around taxes,
right,
you got no excuse in your business.
There's really I cannot think of anything, to me, of course, more boring, or I don't really want to be interested in that. I know we've got to do it. I'm not excited by it. And I think I speak for most of us when we're not too excited about taxes, but somehow you've made taxes interesting.
Yeah, that's what people tell me. So I just try to make it fun.
That's great. And you help these guys, pay less taxes, but also make more money. Tell me about the make more money side of that.
So, it's funny. Most accountants, the mindset of an accountant is, a bean counter, right? That's why people hate accountants, because they're just telling you how to cut expenses. Right. In my philosophy, you can cut expenses, but there's you can definitely, way too many people are focused on revenue only. Like you go to business events, you go to Business Master, you go to any of these like events, and everyone's like,
sales.
how are you doing? Oh,
Right.
great. My sales are up 20%. Well, meanwhile, their profits are down 40%.
Yes,
right.
Of course.
So it's absolutely critical to keep an eye on your cash flows and your budget and monitoring that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's a limit to how many expenses you can reduce, whereas there's unlimited potential in how big you can grow the top line. And so I think it's important to focus on both, but not enough accountants in my mind are focused on what can you do to also expand the pie rather than just trim the edges of the pie. And so when we one component of our business and my CPA firm is tax planning, and that's the one that everyone's all excited about because I hate paying taxes, right? And then the other component is we function as your virtual CFO. And so the virtual CFO component is, yes, it's about cash flows. It's about all, budgets and all of that, but it's also about, let's look at your systems. How can we make more money with less resources, which ultimately allows you to reinvest in the areas in your business that add value to your customer, add value to your client, which increases referrals and all other ways, increase the experience. And so that helps you grow not just your bottom line, but your top line and your bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's reminding me, I took a CEO accelerator, and I remember we were looking at businesses and business examples, these case studies essentially, and all we were able to look at were like the P&Ls and basically looking at their statements and their cash flow statements, and it was like, what's the story here? What's happening in the business? Let's look and see, like, what do we see? Where's the bloat? Where's the, where are we seeing opportunity that maybe we could actually lay into here? Because there is that part where, okay, we'll cut some expenses. And of course that'll drop down to the bottom line. Well, that's great, but we can only do so much of that. So you're talking about, hey, let's look at the bigger picture and see where there's opportunity zones inside of your business. That's great.
Yeah. And now I will say the faster you're growing, the more critical it is to kind of keep an eye on that bottom line, because revenue does cover a lot of sins, but it also it covers up sloppiness, right? So it's really easy when you're growing and I'm an accountant and I've been guilty of this. When you're growing really fast, it's easy to get into the mindset of, oh, we're growing, we're adding more revenue, we can afford that. If it doesn't work out, then who cares, right? And so the faster you are growing, the more critical it is to look at, where your dollars really are being deployed.
Gotcha. Tell me real quick before we get into fatherhood stuff, because a lot of our guys are entrepreneurs, or at least they're people that care about money. They care about the well-being of their family. So they got to focus on their wealth. What's this Cash Flow and Grow book about?
Yeah. So it's all the financial habits, routines, and secrets that you need to implement in your business, or frankly, you can apply the business of your life, right? To make sure that you are, keeping as much of what you make as possible. And it's kind of what I hinted at earlier, really in a nutshell, what I just talked about 2 minutes ago is what the book is about. So, it goes through all, how much cash you should have on hand at any given time. What profit means versus revenue. The importance of having a good set of books, because most business owners doing their books is like going to the dentist and getting a root canal every month, right? Monitoring and identifying key performance indicators or key metrics and drivers of your business, because every business really has 3 to 5 key numbers. Everyone wants to focus on all these different things. There's really only a couple numbers that really truly matter.
Absolutely.
And so it's about how to identify those and then track those and build a system for tracking those. And so
I'm a big fan of a scorecard. So I keep a scorecard, and it's such a good thing to just have a dashboard. It's like, hey, what are the key success factors for my company? And what are we doing that's driving those numbers? And that's like everything, right?
Yeah.
That's so good. So, all right. I wanted to ask you this question. So you mentioned that your father got you into the business. In the terms of the industry, you must have grown up. He was a CPA.
Yeah.
And so like, how closely was your dad, like, with, through elementary school and stuff, was like, you got to know your math and you got to know your numbers, and, like, just really on you? Or was this something that was always a family business?
So he started his first firm when I was 3 months old.
Okay.
So you could say that I grew up with it.
Yes.
that being said, I think I caught it more osmosis. Like a friend and mentor of mine, Ed Milet, says, growing up with your kids, things are caught, not taught. And I think that was true of me growing up. I mean, I was always good at math, but you'd be surprised at how many accountants actually aren't any good at math. They're related, but they're not cause and effect. Right. But I did go, I'd go on ski trips with my dad, and usually the people who can ski are people who have decent means. And also, if you're skiing during the week, it means you have flexibility with your schedule. So most of the times, the people that he was skiing with were his clients who were also having to be his buddies. Mm-hmm. And I'd get pulled out of school, we'd get the powder flu, and we'd go skiing, and on the drives up and drives home, they'd be, getting free tax advice from him. And I would kind of hear some of that. Right. And so, and then through school, we formed corporations he would form corporations for his clients, and he would give me the opportunity to earn a few bucks by filling out the paperwork for the corporation, remotely, and send it off. And so, I did a podcast on this a while back. I haven't released any episodes in a long time, but I said, if you grow up in a family business, it's worth about 10 years of work experience from the day you start, like just because you grow up around it. And so, but for me, I ran about as far away from accounting as I possibly could, because I didn't want to be putting numbers into a box for a living, right? Like what everyone thinks of as an accounting. Yeah.
Did you go for like pop rock or something? You like ran away?
My degree was actually in creative writing.
Okay, cool.
I got an English degree.
Yep.
And that was when I was going through school. It was in the run up to the financial collapse in 2008. And all of course, my communications professor said, it doesn't matter what degree you get. Studies have shown it's just that you have a degree, and that's what will get you a job. And that works really, really well when times are great. It doesn't work so well in an economic collapse. And an English degree didn't get me jack squat in terms of employment opportunities.
Right.
And I got tired of being broke. So I went back to business school, got my MBA, and kind of thought, thinking about what I was going to do, creative writing. I'd written a novel, got a few nibbles about getting it published, and kind of put that on the side. Said, I'm tired of being broke. I need to, go earn a living. And my dad still kept trying to go, you sure you don't want to be an accountant? It's a good career. Like I help people. I don't just sit behind a computer all day.
Yeah.
Even though in the early years you do sit behind a computer all day. And I thought, okay, English major, communication and business degree. Let's try marketing. And so I went and through grad school, I sold insurance for a little bit, dabbled in that, financial planning. It's really just glorified insurance sales. And then I went and worked for a marketing agency right out of grad school. And that's when I learned that just about every job these days is sitting behind a computer, plugging numbers into a box. Just some pay you better for it, and some pay you less for it and make you work even longer hours. And so I actually got let go from my first marketing job. And then kind of found my way into, maybe accounting is not such a bad career after all, and let's give it a try. And worked for, one or two other firms, kind of growing up early in my public accounting career, got some experience for another CPA. And then when I had my daughter, kind of perfect transition for, the parenting topic. Mm-hmm. And my daughter, we were living about an hour and a half from home at the time. And my dad said, why don't you come live close by, more grandparent support, and, I can train you on taking over the firm. And then, so that was in 2014. And then we moved back home. I'm from a very, very tiny town. And so I was instantly bored, even though we moved back home. And so kind of always wanted to move back to where we were in near Sacramento. But kind of took became partners with my dad in 2016. And we took it it was 4 people, and then grew over the next from 2016 to last year in 2021, we were at almost 50 people.
Wow.
And then with COVID and everything that has happened over the last couple of years, and with me being out here a couple times a year for the Tony Robbins events, we picked up and moved my family to Florida, and we're now in Palm Beach County. And to totally leave California, kind of left the family business as well, and now I'm running. Have a firm on my own. Gotcha. And kind of took the Tony Robbins partnership with me to Florida. So
very cool. Yeah. Wow, man. That's such an awesome thing. And, it's cool that your dad, it's cool how you got the opportunity to go out there and like kind of test things out and feel things out. And then your dad was always just kind of gently nudging, he wasn't trying to make you wrong or anything. It was just, it's not such a bad thing. Just so we got it over here and it's a pretty good career choice over here. Cool. I actually grew up in South Florida, so I love Florida. Okay. That is awesome. So I got to ask you this question. Tell us a little bit about your family. So you have this daughter, and tell us about your family. Give us a little bit of that landscape.
Yeah. So met my wife in 2010, actually on the island of Kauai. In Hawaii, we were both in grad school at the same grad school, and we kind of knew of each other. And then we ended up on the same island. Our families were both taking vacations on the same island, the same week at the same hotel.
Oh, wow.
And and so through the magic of Facebook, one of my posts ended up in her feed, and she's like, "We're staying there." And so then, and so we met up, and she took her brother with her just in case there was some creeper falling her to the islands, and then then we hit it off, and fast forward, then we got married, and fast forward, and then in 2014 we had our baby girl. And we were living about an hour and a half from home. And well, that's not too far away. You need a lot of support when you have a brand new baby. And so we had our daughter, and she's a little sweetheart. And then 3 years later, we had our son. And actually, kind of on the topic of sort of, I guess, writing down your vision and writing down your goals and the power of that. Actually, so our son was born in July of 2017. I've always been a big fan of writing down my goals in the 2-year vision, 10-year vision. In 2015, I wrote a 10-year vision for my life, and it was fast forward and looking back on it was from the perspective of we're sitting at Disney. We're about to go on our first trip to Disney World. Or I guess it was like a 7-year vision, whatever it was. And I said, and we're here with my 8-year-old daughter and my 5-year-old son. And that was it. And that was it in terms of kids. 9 or 10 months later, my wife got pregnant, and then it was a boy. And last summer, we took our first trip to Disney World with the kids. They were 7 and 4, so it was a year off. But
but when you say
it was a family,
it's interesting. So when you say writing down goals, you have something a little different than most people do when they write down goals. Because you said you're imagining that you're experiencing something. That is
So I have quarterly goals and annual goal, like actual goals, but then I also
are a little bit more tactical,
right?
And you were like casting a vision.
Yeah, so I always have at least annually, if not semi-annually, update sort of my 5 and 10-year vision, and that's always written as it's a journal entry reflecting on the last 10 years.
That's awesome.
And written as if it's actually happened. And I've done those I've been doing those for I don't know, I think since grad school, so about almost a decade now. And going back and looking at those, like, it is so incredible. Just like things I wrote once, and your best practice is to like read it every day or read it every month. Right. And there are things though that I wrote it once and I shoved it in a drawer, and then I'll come back on it 4 years later. I'm like, holy crap. All of that came true. Like
that's so
cool. And even more than, like it's pretty powerful.
Now, without getting too woo, but like obviously there's power in this, and I've heard about this before. I forget what it's not creative visioning. I don't know. It's just interesting. But what do you think it is? Is it that you are willing it into your future? Is it metaphysical? Is it all of the above? Is there a spiritual aspect? Is it you placing that energy there? And just what do you think that is?
I would say yes to all the above, and I don't know. So there's a guy by the name of Joe Dispenza, actually, who's done a lot of work on this. That actually marries the science to like actual studies to this. And there was a study that they had some people like literally like quantum physics or like slices of time and stuff.
Right.
And there was a study, and I don't remember all the details of it, but where they had 2 hospital wards from it was like the 1970s or 1980s, And in the 90s, they had people pray for the prayer for one ward to heal and then not the other. And the healing rates of the ward that was prayed for, like, it makes no sense at all, but they were significantly higher than the ones that weren't. And I don't know how you explain that other than,
I think
divine intervention, but
the quantum is an interesting part of it. Is like that we're learning so much about the quantum physics and how, there's these kind of other realities that are the reality. I remember What the Bleep Do You Know is kind of, or Do We Know was kind of touching on that. So yeah, maybe that's part of it too, where it's like, obviously we're just theorizing now, but that when you're stating it and you're reflecting on it, you're actually, you mentioned you're reflecting like it had happened. So you're not stating it like, oh, I hope one day it'll happen. You said you're reading it like it has.
Writing it and reading it as if you're looking back on it having happened. And you don't know the how. Like, and there's things that I've written down where I'm like, I'm just writing this down because let's see. And have, like, no expectations of it, it actually coming true. And then it did. And it's down to like the gender of our son, right? It's just it's pretry wild. So
okay,
that was a nice tangent to explain. So we have also a boy.
Yes.
So yeah, we were living at home or not at home, but living in my hometown for the first almost year of my son's life. And then we moved back to the near Sacramento city called Roseville, where my wife and I first were living when we first got married. And then we're there for a few years until we moved to Florida last year. And our kids absolutely love it. I mean, they have a hard time being far from grandparents because they're, pretty close to both my wife's and my parents. But now my daughter wants to be a marine biologist because she loves the ocean so much. And that's been pretty cool. Like, we joined a boat club, and so we take them out boating like a couple times a month, and just trying to get, continue to, like, my wife and I both grew up with parents who were around a lot and who wanted to create a lot of experiences for their kids. Mm-hmm. And so now my wife and I are just trying to build on that and just create as many memories as possible with our children. So, being in a vacation destination makes it a little easier to do that on a daily basis.
Right.
So it's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can do kind of like little staycations over there and do experiences that most people think of as excursions. And you're like, this is the weekend trip.
Yeah, exactly. Like going snorkeling on a, in-service day when they're out of school that day, so it's pretty fun.
And so how has your childhood growing up, you mentioned, like, we're kind of touching on this right now. So I wanted to see if we can dig in a little bit deeper. Yeah. You're touching on the fact that, part of the, the tradition that you had in your family around making memories and being involved in that way is something that you guys are trying to carry on. What are some other things about your childhood, or maybe the way that you grew up, that you are trying to impart on your children, and how are you doing that?
Yeah. I would say that number one, this is the first year my son's playing soccer, and my dad always coached us. And so I'm coaching actually as soon as we wrap up this call. I'm heading to the soccer field.
Oh, cool.
And so I think the biggest thing, so both my wife and I's parents owned their own business. And in my mind, and I talk about this at Tony Robbins' Business Mastery when I close and talk about the speech and talk about my why. And in my mind, there's no better vehicle to raise an incredible family than entrepreneurship. And so, I tried being an employee for a number of different, companies, and it never really fulfilled me. And I think it's because I've got that like freedom itch, like that, like, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do it my way. And that was true even when I was partners with my dad, like, hey, here's this thing called Instagram. People are going to hire their CPA through Instagram. And he's like, what, are you crazy? So I think, they both tried to do things a little different, and definitely different from their parents. And so just kind of continuing that legacy. And then as far as like doing things a little differently, one thing I will like give my dad absolute credit for is that he was home at 5 every day. And they're coaching every game. And at the same time, never really had more than 3 or 4 employees, which is, he stayed in business for 30 years, which is a feat in and of itself. And so one thing that, because he didn't want to travel, he wanted to be that, not be gone a lot. And something that, like, what I would say is a little bit of a different pivot is that my wife and I are willing to make a little bit more of that sacrifice. And, so I've traveled a lot more than my dad ever did, in terms of, building this, and, having 50 employees is a lot different, different company.
Yeah.
And so trying to sort of take that and take the ball and run with it and expand it rather than keep it the same. I would say, because my dad he was the son of a pastor who was also a substitute teacher. So they did not come from a whole lot of means. Like, right. I remember him saying that he didn't belong when he felt like he didn't belong when he walked into Macy's because it was rich. Right. And so he took that and expanded to where he was at an almost $1 million business. And so I'm just trying to take the same thing and carry the torch to the next level. So
yeah, while keeping that kind of that distinction of, making sure that you're making memories with your children. And I love that. And so I had John Vroman on not so long ago.
Oh yeah. I know. Yeah.
John gave me that great, he has that great distinction, which is that we're family men with businesses, not businessmen with families.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that. It's like, that's such a good way to frame it up. So tell me, what are some of your favorite parts about being a dad?
Oh gosh. I think it's like so I love like going on trips and making big memories with the kids, but like I would say probably more so just like the little moments that catch you off guard that you don't expect, like when they're sick and they're finally stopping to snuggle with you.
Right.
And like last night, our 5-year-old, we were sitting at the table and he asked for his own copy of a Bible. And we're like, whoa, that's cool. And when he, gives you a little hug and he gives a little pat on the back, and then like, him just being so fired up to go play soccer with me and being excited to spend that time. And every day so family dinners are big, like almost every night we do family dinners. And we started it's become a daily thing now, and it's like a game for the kids. We share our wins and loses for the day. And so everyone goes around the table and shares at least one win from the day, and then at least one lose. And so it allows us to make sure we're always focused on the positivity, but it also opens up the opportunity for them to have a daily time to share something that might be a struggle for them and open that conversation. And we're starting that young, so that hopefully when, when they get into those middle school years, hopefully we'll see if it happens. I don't know yet, but that those conversations continue. But those are really, really fun times too. And hearing what their wins are. And sometimes they're not what you expect.
Right.
And then same thing with the loses. And, sometimes they're justified and sometimes they're just totally blown out of proportion and, mountains out of molehills. And so those moments are fun. And then of course, getting to take them and travel with them everywhere is a lot of fun too.
I love the wins and losses conversation. One of the things I try to encourage dads to do is make sure that we're embracing mistakes, because they are such an important part of being successful. That mistakes are just part of the journey. There's nobody who does it flawlessly. You're never going to do it perfect. It's just part of how it works. It's a part of life. And so many people kind of grow up thinking they need to hide all of it, hide every loss, hide every mistake. And so you guys are having it at dinner time. What'd you lose on? Talk about that. That's such a beautiful thing. Cool, man. What would you say are, if you're open to sharing, and it's okay if not, but what would you say is something that is a challenge? And when as guys, we're always trying to relate here, and we all have certain challenges that we're working on. What would be a challenge in fatherhood for you right now?
I would say 1000% being present. It's, and if anyone who's a business owner can probably is probably shaking their head, nodding their head when they hear that. But like we've been growing over 100% per year for a couple, 2-3 years now. And that, in a service business, especially, there's always, especially when you're growing like that, there's always some sort of fire to put out.
Mm-hmm.
And we have we don't have, like, I'm sitting in, an office, but it's like a co-working space office. All of our team members are all across the country. So when they're across time zones, there's questions that come up at all hours of the day. And then you throw social, a decent social media following into the mix, and there's always DMs. There's always new content to post. There's always trends to follow. And so there's always something else. And so I really, really struggle with taking the time to just set that aside, shut it down, and just be with the family. Mm-hmm. That's why I love soccer so much, frankly, because I can't run around with my phone in my pocket. I got to put it in my kid's backpack and just run around and play with them. And so that's something I'm, trying to be more and more intentional about, not waking up with my phone, but like putting it aside, having a cup of coffee with the family, in the morning, and the whole morning routine thing. I actually take more of a slower morning. Like I'll read and I'll maybe journal, but I'm not like out trying to make the very first, at least right now in this phase of my life, not trying to make the first hour the hardest. I kind of, when the kids come down, we'll sit and hang out, and then we'll, most days go to school together as a family. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go get to work. But that's probably the thing I struggle with the most.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely certain everybody is probably shaking their head, regardless of, and you have an enormous amount of responsibilities and also all these different, nodes of how people are actually connecting with you. As you mentioned, Instagram and all of these different things, but we just did a contemplative dialogue where we contemplated on the prompt, what is it like to be a child in 2022? And it was a very interesting prompt. And one of the things that came out of there was, as a prominent thing, was technology. Look at how different it is to see, how many interfaces there are in the house, how those interfaces are interacting with each one of us individually. There's so many different things, but it's like, wow, we really need to stop and pause for a moment and notice just how different it is. I remember back in the day, you would be learning a new skill or a new trick, say on a skateboard or something, and you want your parents to see, you'd say, Dad, watch this, come watch me do this trick. And then you try to do it. And of course, for some reason, when they were watching, you couldn't do it. You're like, I've done it 10 times. And then you're just nervous. You have that anxiety that they're going to turn their direction back, or their attention back to something else. And so there's all that angst. And I thought about, like, man, imagine that we had that angst back then and our parents didn't even have a cell phone. Right. They didn't even have an iPod or an iPad or something in their hands. So it's a different time. It definitely is very important. We practice at my house, what's called the digital sunset. So when the sun goes down, all technology goes down. In the winter, I like that. In the winter, that's early. But we do it for multiple reasons, because the blue light actually also makes it harder for us to get into a good night's rest. So we do it for the blue light, but it also has the added benefit of, once all the interfaces are down, we're usually grabbing objects like, I grab the guitar, or I'm reading a book, or I'm actually playing and hanging out with the kids. And it just is an added bonus to us doing that. So, cool. All right. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say has had the most positive effect on your parenting? Maybe it's a book, your wife, your family. Like, what would you say has been the
most positive impact on my parenting? I think two things. I think number one, my parents weren't perfect, but they were very involved, and so that was absolutely a model for how I grew up, or how I ultimately decided how I was going to parent. And there was never any question I wasn't going to have kids. Like, I know for some people that's a discussion. Same thing for my wife. That was a discussion. So I think, obviously our parents shape us. That's a huge thing. And so how they raised me, for sure. And then I'd say the number two would be my wife and I both coming from parents of entrepreneurs. I think definitely shaped the way that we've decided to mold our family. And then number 3, and I would argue this is probably the biggest one, is the daily feedback I get from my children in terms of them being an absolute mirror of what I'm doing in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, down to, they'll say phrases that I didn't even know I was saying, or, they'll talk about things that, my wife and I were chatting about, didn't think they were listening, or they are literally a reflection of you. And so you see them doing things that maybe you don't want them doing. You go, holy crap, I gotta change this. So I think that just that constant feedback loop has been a very powerful shaper. I always thought, I didn't expect it to be that. Everyone, before you're a parent, they're like, parents tell you, oh, your kids are, mirror images of you, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to be this perfect parent, whatever. And then you actually live it, and you're like, whoa, that's true. Holy moly, So that's definitely been, in terms of what's caused me to constantly evolve and try to continue improving, definitely been the biggest shaper.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I have to tell this really quick story. So I'm in my son's, I go to knock on my teenager's door, and he answers, or maybe I call his name, but he answers, "What?" And there was a little bit of a tone, like a what kind of thing. And I was kind of like, I don't really like that tone. So then whenever he comes to the door, I said, "Hey," I said, whatever I needed of him. And then I said, "Hey, can I ask you a favor?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Whenever I call your name, do you mind just next time if you would just say, yeah, Dad," or something like that? Because when you said what, that with that, it kind of had a tone. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry. Didn't even, mean to," or whatever. So I had no idea that this happened. But apparently right after we ended our conversation, my little guy is yelling in the kitchen, "Dad!" And I yelled, "What?" Literally with the exact same tone. And it wasn't until later when he's like, we were having this conversation, and he was like, "Yeah, so I don't know if you noticed, Dad, how you yelled what right after you," and I had no idea. I totally didn't even notice. So it's hilarious. Okay. So I want to ask you final question. Do you have any advice for dads out there, maybe a new dad, or just something that maybe you've picked up over the years between your father and your parenting, that you would give to another dad, a fellow dad out there?
Yeah. So one thing that really comes to mind that I've been working on, it's kind of related to the presence thing. I mentioned Ed Milet in the beginning. And the reason I bring him up again, because he is a father and he's built something pretty monumental. For those of you who don't know who Ed Milet is, he's, worth about $750 million, owns, 40 or 50 businesses, pretty, I think top 5 speaker, incredible speaker. But we were at one of his events last year, and someone asked what your biggest regret is. And he wasn't saying that he had a lot of regrets, but he said the one thing was, I wish I had just turned off the work more often, because it would have gotten done eventually anyways. It wouldn't have made that big of an outcome. And because his kids are his youngest just went to college last year. And he's like, that part goes by so fast. And so that really hit me. Like if someone at that stature can say, I should have just I didn't need to respond to the email in that moment. Right. If I take a couple hours to just go. So right now, we've got all kinds of different things going on. I've got an event coming up next month, and I really don't have time to coach my son's soccer.
Right.
But, my wife volunteered me, and I thought about saying, I'm too busy. And then I said, you know what? That extra hour twice a week is not going to make or break my future 20 years from now. And so I think it's just being intentional about just saying it's okay, and take that time. And since he gave that advice, I just kind of reflected more on that. And everyone thinks you got to build what you're building now, right? You got to do everything now. You got to be in a hurry. You got to grow 200,000% year over year and build this huge mega millions fortune right now in your 20s or in your 30s, whenever you listen to this. And if you actually look at average life expectancy, and it's growing every year. 80, 90 years old, you have 18 years with your children, and almost no one actually makes their fortune during childbearing ages. They actually make their child rearing ages too. You have so much time to exponentially grow after they move out that, like, take this time. You literally can't get this back. And everyone says you can't get this back. But I think when it really was reality for me was I was talking with my wife a couple months ago, and I said, they're going to be gone. Like, you literally, there's a stat that says once your child moves out, you've spent 80% of the time you're ever going to spend with them. And so I have an 8-year-old, so she'll be 9 next year, which means she's halfway to moving out, assuming everything goes normal, which means I've spent 40% of the time that I'm ever going to spend with her in my entire life and her entire life with her. And now we're getting in, we're not too far away from the middle school year. So we're coming in very short on the times where she's wants to come hug and daddy and, hey, let's, and so when you think about the window of the 18, first to 18, then you shrink it down. If you got younger kids, the window that they want to actually spend time with you is even that much smaller. Yeah. And so just, I think it's just important that we all give ourselves grace around that. And it's okay to let a few emails be responded to a little later. And you can tackle that project next week. It's going to be there. And so that's something I've been, I think that I've been more intentional about, but that I would give anyone who's, especially if they're in those first couple years of having a baby or toddler, especially under 5, that, I'm only still early in my parenting career, but it does go by very fast, and it's okay to take that time to spend with them.
I think that is a great message. Yes. Thank you so much, Tyler. This has been a joy. I really appreciate you making the time for us. And where can someone find you and get a hold of you if they would like to learn more about what you're doing? And then also just maybe they need some help with their taxes.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm most active in terms of social on Instagram. Instagram, it's at Tyler McBroom. And then I've been a little more active on Twitter lately, and I have a whole lot less of a smaller of an audience on Twitter. So probably if you shoot me a message on Twitter, which is Tyler McBroom CPA, probably, get a little bit more of a likelihood of a response. But, and then if anyone is interested in the book Cash Flow and Grow, they can get a copy for free on tylermcbroom.com. So pretty much if you Google me, you'll find me.
That's great. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate it. And
thank you.
For the listeners out there, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so at this time. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next episode.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to bedadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.